All right, I think I'm going to get started. So, welcome for everyone that's in. Again, you're in the right place if you're here for a webinar, Digital Parenting and Custody, Managing Communication and Privacy in the Age of Screens. So, welcome. I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Attorney Cherise Williams, and I'm the owner of the law office of Cherise L. Williams. And I'm licensed in Maryland and DC. I'm a family law attorney. I specialize in collaborative divorce. I do collaborative prenuptials and postnuptials. And I also do litigation as well, custody, child support, all of the things that you would normally think of under the family law umbrella. And I've been practicing for over 20 years, and my office is in Rockville, Maryland. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And before we begin, I wanted to do some housekeeping just to kind of let you know the lay of what's going on today. So, so today's presentation will be recorded. You are being recorded. And what we're going to do is hold questions until the end. I will have a question and answer period. So if you submitted questions in advance, then I have them. If not, you can put a question in the chat and that'll be how I retrieve questions for purposes of answering. You can even speak to other participants if you want in the chat. And that sometime you may meet someone that has similar situation as you. So this being recorded, I will post it on my YouTube channel. And so you will have access to it. So if people come in late or you missed a portion or you need to repeat a portion, then that will be accessible. And we'll give that information at the end as well. And just so everyone's aware, this is a webinar, so it's for educational purposes only. It's not legal advice or the creation of an attorney-client relationship. So if you need a specific guidance, you can contact my office for your case specifics. And I'll also give that information again at the end. And if you're lucky enough to stay at the end, we do have a guide that we will give out to those who want it. And you just need to just let us make sure we have your email address and we can send that to you. And it'll just be uh, uh, basically a summary of kind of the key points that we're going to talk about here today. So without further ado, we're going to get into the substance of why we're here. So, we're going to first talk about the idea of digital co-parenting landscape. So, what I mean by that, and so is essentially the reality that when you co-parent, a lot of communication and parts of co-parenting occurs through digital means. So, whether that's through text messaging, emails, shared calendars, social media, there's some screen involved, whether it's your phone, your tablet, your email. That's the way that we operate now as far as communication. So, as we're communicating and using this method, it does come with some risk. Now, when you had a relationship and it ends, and it can end on good terms, peaceful terms, but if you have children and you're co parenting, the idea is that you're going to have to communicate beyond this relationship. You can't just necessarily walk away and never speak to the person again. So, what do you do when you have to communicate and you're trying to navigate this new direction that you're in? So, this is hard when you're trying to maintain that co-parenting relationship and you also want to maintain a relationship with your child if they're going back and forth between homes. So, thinking about the idea that even a single message can cause anger or frustration, and these are things that could in the future become part of a legal record, and we'll get into exactly what I mean by that. And so if you have to end up in court, that's part of what I mean by that. So you need to think about your communication and the tone and things like that. These miscommunications can lead to escalation, can cause people to not necessarily work together when they're making decisions on behalf of their child. So think about your intention when you're going into digital communications. You need to think about communication that supports it, that's not undermining your parenting role. So always think about what's in the best interest of your child. And I know that is a broad statement for me to say that, but think about that before you hit send. If it's related to the child, or and if it's not related to the child, you may not want to hit send at all. So let's talk about some of the digital tools that are available now, that are you may think about using if you're co-parenting. So when I say digital tools or apps, there are things that are specifically designed for co-parents. Things, there are apps called Our Family Wizard, excuse me. There's something called Talking Parents and another one called App Close. Now, I don't endorse specifically any of these. I'm not getting paid or anything like that. I have had clients use them, and I know the courts are much more familiar with them. I've had cases where this is specifically being ordered. And so I'm just suggesting this to people who are unaware that these even exist. These apps actually allow you to keep everything compartmentalized within the app. Now it is subscription based. So generally speaking, for some of them, you do have to pay on each side to use it. There are free features. I think specifically App Close, I think is out of the three, maybe the one that has more free services. So you can definitely look and search and figure out what works best and make suggestions if you're in a co-parenting court case, or you're going to go into one, or you're trying to settle the case, to think about using this method, because it monitors, it keeps it organized by date. You'll have, you don't have to worry about, oh my goodness, I lost that phone, or what happened to these emails, or what happened to these. It has a calendar. It allows you to, it tones it, what do they call it? It polices your tone essentially. So that's a good way to keep both of you both in the mind frame of best interest of the child, which I stated earlier. So when looking at these platforms, you can think about storing and using this as a method to help you start the dialogue and communication. Now, of course, these tools do not fix everything. You are still responsible for yourself and what you're thinking about and what you're doing. Those apps also can be used for finances. So that's something like you can log schedules, like I said, expenses, video calls, even if you want to talk to your child. This can allow you to do that outside of like FaceTime and other WhatsApp and other general video methods. So it is important, whatever you do, that you exercise self control, stay within your boundaries, and you're aware of the context of your communication. So that's super important, because these are just aids to you, but you're going to be the one that's going to be inputting the communication in them. So let's also go ahead and talk about specifically more about text and emails and the use of social media. So, as a lawyer, when I get a case and there's custody, text messages, emails, DMs, these are majority of the methods that people use to communicate. So, these things become evidence in cases. And sometimes people are very organized and very good about maintaining their text, emails, DMs, but other people are not. But the thing is, if you delete yours, the other person will probably still have them. So these things can either be used for you or against you. And what I mean by that, as evidence. And there's specific ways that emails and texts and things have to come in. That's a whole nother conversation for another day, but it is utilized as evidence. So judges can look at the tone, the language, and whether there's a history of cooperation, ignoring messages, how your temperament is. Are you causing conflict? Are you alleviating conflict? So these are all things that can also show patterns of abuse, because oftentimes some people use these things to inflict emotional abuse, and they may even threaten people through these forms. So you just need to be very careful what you put in writing, because again, it becomes evidence. So before sending a message, I usually think, pause, ask yourself, could I be comfortable? Would I be comfortable if a judge had to read this out loud? Would that make me think twice? Oh man, if somebody else had to read this, that's not the on the other side of this that I'm actually upset with, how would I feel about that? And even with social media, what may be seen to you as harmless or a joke, some people put inspirational quotes or relationship updates. The other side may feel like they may misinterpret what you had to say. They may feel like you're trying to weaponize, because sometimes people send subliminal messages. I know we've all seen that, and you're actually talking about someone very close to you that did something to you. So these can all tear apart co-parenting relationships. So again, you're responsible for the digital footprint that you create, and deleting it. People screenshot. We already know that people are quick to screenshot. So just because you think you've deleted it and it's gone, someone else may still have it. So, and also when you're downloading the history of like Facebook or social media, oftentimes there's still that digital footprint with lawyers can pull metadata and things like that. So it doesn't mean that it's gone forever. So it's better if it's going to be a questionable post, don't even put it up there. Don't send it, especially if you're in the middle of a case. So just that stuff becomes discoverable, and even your inbox. So keep that all in mind. So let's also talk about, so more on this particular topic, um, understanding like it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. So that's kind of where we are. And so looking at an example, let's just say there's a situation where your co-parent is habitually late to pickups and drop-offs. And so you send a text message, and this would be my example of one that is a bad text message. And you said something like, "You're always late. You're so irresponsible. No wonder our child doesn't want to be around you or go with you." Now, you might feel that frustration, and you may be right in feeling that frustration, but that kind of message reads as you attacking or could be perceived as hostile. It could hurt your credibility and can be used to show that you're unwilling to compromise or be respectful. So here's something that could be a better version of that. "Hey, I've noticed the pickup time can run late. Can we work on being closer to the schedule next week? It helps keep things consistent for Amber. Thanks." So you're essentially turning that same fact that they're late, but you're just focusing on using words to just let them know that you're understand that you're noticing, you're giving them notice that they're late, but you're also showing how it relates to your child Amber. And so that is a better use of saying that this particular action impacts this child this way. That is what when I discuss best interest of the child, that is best interest child centered communication. It doesn't mean that it's like you're being you're not pointing out something that can be improved, but you're doing it in a constructive way that relates to the child. So that is something that you can think about, how to phrase things that always inserts the child in a way that shows how it impacts them. So let's talk about social media. You can do something even vague as, some people just never change. Can that, and that you could be talking about your ex. That can be interpreted. And so you want to avoid posting things about your divorce, about your parenting issues, or even that new relationship too soon. And remember, deleting that message won't erase it. So people have screenshots and backups that can live forever. So think about how that could play into a future court case, even if you don't have one today. So next, we're going to talk about setting those digital boundaries and privacy. So this is something that I think most people don't think about and don't utilize enough. But if you're going through a case and you do have some level of cooperation and you may be able to come up with an agreement, you may want to think about having some form of tech or communication agreement built into your custody agreement. And what I mean by that is talking about how much time you believe your child, you could set your own rules. So these are just examples. So people often complain about screen time for their child, and maybe one parent is more lenient, the other parent is more strict. And so, what apps are your child allowed to use while they're at your home? What things are you able to, like, how much use are they able to have on that screen time before bed? I've had cases where kids will, in one home, they use the screen and they fall asleep with the screen and TV in their bed. And the other home, they're very strict and they're like, no, by this time you're done with the screen and this child goes to bed at this time. So let's say you share custody. The parent who doesn't use screen time or has a strict cutoff, they have the child Monday to Friday, school drop off. The other parent picks up the child from Friday to Monday. So they are able to watch the screen as much as they want at the other parent's house. Then come Monday morning, because they had that extra screen time, they're extremely drowsy, sleepy, can't concentrate at school because they weren't really fully asleep. So these things can progressively go against the other parent. So in order to avoid one, your child not being able to have a great Monday morning, and also just conflict between the co-parents, you may want to think about having some form of tech or communication agreement that you can implement in both homes. And this is not going to be perfect. Parents parent differently, but it is something to consider and think about. And we also want to talk about photos and posting children. And getting consent is helpful, but it's not required. I just think that it's always nice to figure out your position on that. And doing this line of work, I know parents use Facebook and social media to update their kid, the family, their friends, and kids use it. But there are a lot of predators, and people often look at social media and pictures that are up there. People tag the location of their child, name the school, name where they are all the time. And these are things, if there's kidnapping and things of that nature, these are places that are prone to get this information from. So it's just something to be aware of. And so even if you agree that both parents are free to post their child, you may say, well, don't tag all the locations, or, whatever parameters you want around that. So that's something to consider. And also, you want to be transparent with the other parent, because if there's a new relationship and that's posted too soon, sometimes that can trigger emotions. And I will talk about that a little more in a later section. So now let's talk about digital civility and emotional intelligence. Now, again, I talked about this earlier. You can't control who's on the other side of the screen, but you can control yourself. So if you message your child and think the other parent is reading them instead of your child, or responding, there is sometimes some level of loss of control, right? You can't always control how the other parent is with their child in the home. And it's a minor and young kids. There may be an expectation that the other parent has a right to go through the phone and see who's texting for not just the purposes of the parent, but other reasons. So now, if you're trying to send direct message to your child and you feel like, wow, my child's not reading this, then you can have solution and try to get to the bottom of that, especially if there's going to be some form of litigation, by kind of sending messages that have very particular subjects, open-ended questions, or something that you remember, so that if the child comes home without directly saying, hey, did you get my text, or did you read it, or does your mom or dad not let them see it, you could just ask about that topic, or see if the child even knows what you're talking about in general. It's best not to interrogate a child, but you can kind of figure out. And maybe if you do know your child once or twice text, you can look at the lawyer can help you look at patterns for where you think the other parent responded versus the child responding. So these are all things, but you just don't want the child to feel uncomfortable or in the middle, and they definitely shouldn't be interrogated. So this is something that can be figured out later on, if you need to. So also, it's easier if you just do phone calls sometime instead of sending text and those things. Then you're talking to your child. Doesn't mean the other parent won't be in the room. They could be eavesdropping. These are things that happen all the time. So I'm just bringing them up because these are issues that come up. Again, as long as you are able to communicate and talk, hopefully that won't be a problem. But depending on the reason they're eavesdropping, or if it truly interferes with your ability to have meaningful conversation, it may just be the way it is. So that's just kind of the nature of co-parenting. So we want to talk about the fact that this emotional intelligence, I always say, is a superpower for a parent. So before responding to anything harsh or triggering, you need to again pause. It is not always good to respond when you're triggered. And so if you're drafting a response before, again, think about, does this message serve the child or does it just soothe my emotions? And we all do this even as adults with one another. Sometimes you'll draft a message and you shouldn't send it. You just want to get that feeling out. This goes, the same thing applies when co-parenting. Everything doesn't have to be said. So reactivity can build patterns of behavior that can again be used as evidence in the future when looking at custody evaluators. So let's say sometime you go to court and you there's a custody evaluation order and they can look at text messages and emails and look at the temperament and make all these assumptions about you. I've had cases where a parent from one text message, they've just deemed this parent to be out of control. Now, what the parent said may have not been inappropriate, but I just want to give the idea that this can happen where you're leaving it up to somebody else to subjectively make a determination about you based on maybe a bad day or a bad moment. So just think about those things. And they want to think about who can maintain their calm, who's escalated easily, and who's always trying to understand and think about the child versus themselves, and their own interests. So those are pretty much the emotional intelligence. So you want to be slow and steady. That's what wins the race. So just practice, messages and thoughts and, think about it. And you have Chat GPT now that can even help you figure out how to reword something. So if you don't know what that is, then figure that out, because that can be a tool that you use for this purposes. And so next we're going to talk about nuances when you have a new relationship and how that also shows up with digital presence, and it can cause conflict. So when you're in a relationship, obviously, sometime for some people, moving forward doesn't mean that you're wiping the slate clean completely. It may feel like that way to one party, but it may not to the other party. The other party may still feel some level of pain. This is a natural human emotion. So, how you introduce a new partner online matters. This is especially true if there was infidelity with that new partner. So this is not a one size fits all rule. And of course, people are adults and they have a right to move on. But thinking about whether this should be posted, having a conversation with your new partner, if they want to rush to post in a new relationship, and think about how that may impact your parenting, which should be a priority of yours, and if they're your partner, it should be a priority of the partners as well. So just those are dialogues that should be on the table. And whether and how, if you, especially if you haven't told, let's say, well, there was no infidelity and it's just a new partner, and so you may want to give a heads up to your old partner, depending on the situation. So, if conflict remains from the past, it is sometimes best to just acknowledge it. Sometimes a simple apology or in a respectful way can help heal. So you don't really want to blindside people in those situations, and so be the bigger person. Understand that sometimes it takes people longer to move on. So those are just some of the things that come across my fact pattern as a lawyer. And so just looking at how to help people think about what they're sending and what they're doing when it comes to the digital world. So let's talk about some of the key takeaways for today. So, one of the key takeaways is that you have the ability to use a structured co parenting app that can help you reduce conflict and help you preserve records. It's all in one place. When it's time or the need to go to court is there, you can download and utilize these things, and they should be time, date stamped, and things of that nature, which preserve their credibility for court and the lawyer. Whew, I love when a person is organized. Those are my favorite clients. Next, treat every written message like it could be read in court. So before you send, think about how it sounds outside of the person you're trying to send it to. Someone else, a third party that would not, maybe not even understand the context of that one message or the history or why you sent it. Think about how that sounds. And if you think it's going to be something you wouldn't want someone to hear, rephrase it, delete it, don't send. Next, collaborate on tech rules across both homes so children can see consistency. Those are important things that may help you. You also want to guard against you want to guard the privacy of your child. So avoid tagging locations, posting about, again, what I talk about, those new relationships. You want to think about being consistent. Don't just do things because there's a court case. It's not to say that if you learn better, you can't do better, because obviously, but the courts do want to see a pattern of behavior in the terms of evidence. And it also is just better for you as an individual. And as your child grows, seeing you get along um, is probably better for their mental health overall and their self-esteem. So just working on that. It may not be easy. It may take, years, but one step at a time, you can get there. And sometimes you always have to be the bigger person. So just think about all of those things as you navigate co-parenting. So now we're getting to the question and answer. So let me see if there are any in the chat. Okay. I do have some questions that were submitted previously. So one question, um, is it okay for me to FaceTime or text FaceTime with my child when they're with the other parent? And so generally, yes, it is. And so I always say those type of communications can be agreed upon in advance if you are able to come to an agreement. But otherwise, it is healthy for you to have ability to communicate with the child when they're with the other parent and their custodial time. But generally, if you can pick a maybe morning time or evening time, something that's not super disruptive to the child, and depending on the child's age, you want to think about how long they can actually be on call. Don't be unrealistic. And also, if they're older, do not use that call to pry into the home. I've had cases, or a case where the parent actually had them put the camera and like put the camera to go look around the house, like walk from room to room and turn the camera. So you don't want to do things like that unless there's an actual good reason to. But just for your general suspicion or purposes, that's not a good practice. So don't put your child in the middle of that kind of stuff. Can text message or social media posts, of course, what we said already, be used in custody cases? And yes, there often are, they will. So you just always have to be mindful about how you're using that. Um, Someone asked, can I use screenshots of text messages to show that my co parent violated the custody order? Yes, but make sure the evidence is complete and authentic. And again, that's another presentation, but there's time, date stamps, and you can't just cut screenshot only one. You sometimes need to show the chain of communication and prove that it is the other person's phone number. That's something you can talk over with a lawyer. But yes, those things can be done. So now I just wanted to wrap up because I know we're getting close to time and I like to respect people's time. These are my social media handles. Again, this will be posted on my YouTube channel, which my name on there is 50 Shades of Law. And if you haven't subscribed, you can. If you need personalized assistance, again, you can call my office. My phone number is 240-499-8569 to schedule a consultation. I'll be more than happy to discuss more specifics with you if you are setting up that consultation. And I'm very thankful for you coming today. I hope you learned something. I hope this will make you think about your own situation and how you can handle stuff. That's my goal. That's why I give these free webinars. I do enjoy talking to people about parenting, custody, and things under the family law umbrella. So join us again next month. We'll be back for another webinar. And if you're here and you would like to have the guide, let us know. And we can send that to you via email. So again, thank you, everyone.